Can I help you avoid a very expensive mistake? If you're over 60 and thinking about selling your home, the rules have changed, and I don't mean a little. The way buyers shop has changed. The way homes are marketed has changed. The way inspections work has changed. The way negotiations unfold have changed. Even the reasons people decide to move in the first place have changed. And after nearly 20 years in real estate, I've found that the homeowners who struggle the most usually aren't the ones with the hardest homes to sell. They're the ones using yesterday's playbook in today's market. Because the biggest mistake usually isn't accepting too little money. It isn't choosing the wrong realtor. It isn't forgetting to make repairs. The biggest mistake happens months before the house ever goes on the market. And by the end of this video, I'm going to share the one question I ask homeowners before we ever talk about price. Because once you answer that question, almost every other decision becomes much clearer. Now, if we haven't met, my name is Fred Pascal. I'm the president and founder of Hero Homebuyers. And over the last 20 years, I've bought, sold, built, flipped, brokered, appraised, and evaluated thousands of homes. I don't tell you that to impress you. I tell you because everything I'm about to share comes from real conversations with homeowners, real transactions, and years of seeing what actually works in the real world. My goal isn't to tell you what I do. It's to help you make the best decision for your situation. Because selling your home after 60 usually isn't just a real estate decision. It's a life decision. And when people get into trouble, it's rarely because they made one terrible decision. It's usually because they made several reasonable decisions without realizing they were solving the wrong problem. Let me explain what I mean. A lot of homeowners start by asking questions like, what should I fix? How much is my house worth? When should I list it? Those are all good questions. But in my experience, they're usually not the first questions that should be asked. Because before we ever talk about repairs or pricing or timing, we need to answer something much more important. What are you actually trying to accomplish? That may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people never stop to answer it. I've worked with homeowners whose number one priority was getting the absolute highest price possible. I've worked with others who cared far more about certainty or convenience or staying in the home for another 3 months, or moving closer to their grandchildren before the school year started. Completely different priorities, completely different recommendations. And yet many homeowners start making decisions before they're clear on what success even looks like for them. That's why I said earlier that the biggest mistake usually happens before the home is ever listed. Because once you start solving the wrong problem, it's very easy to spend money you didn't need to spend, delay decisions that didn't need to be delayed, or create stress that could have been avoided altogether. Now, here's where the rules have changed in a way many homeowners don't fully appreciate. Today's buyer probably isn't you. Think about the last time you bought a house. There's a good chance you drove neighborhoods, looked for yard signs, walked through homes before seeing dozens of professional photos online. That's not how most buyers shop today. Today, your first showing happens on a phone. Long before anyone schedules an appointment, they've already formed an opinion. They've looked at every photo. They've zoomed in on the kitchen. They've compared your home to 10 others or maybe 20. They've checked the property taxes, the flood zone, the neighborhood, the school ratings, the commute. Sometimes they've even looked at satellite images before deciding whether your home is worth seeing in person. Is that fair? Maybe not, but it is the world we live in today. And once you understand that, it changes the way you should think about preparing your home for sale. Instead of asking yourself, would I buy this house? Ask yourself instead, would my adult child or would my grandchild stop scrolling long enough to schedule a showing? Those are two very different questions, and they often lead to two very different answers. Now, here's where I see many homeowners unintentionally spend money they never needed to spend. They assume they need to renovate before they sell. Sometimes it's true, but far less often than people think. I've walked through homes where the owner proudly told me they had just spent $30,000, $40,000, or even $50,000 updating the property before putting it on the market. Then, after the home is sold, they realize they only recovered a fraction of what they spent. Now, before I go any further, let's be clear. I'm not saying you should never make improvements. Sometimes repairs absolutely make sense. If the roof has reached the end of its life and it's likely to affect a buyer's ability to get financing, that matters. If there's a plumbing leak, that matters. If there are safety issues, those matter. But replacing perfectly functional countertops simply because they're no longer the latest trend, that's a very different conversation. One of the biggest mindset shifts I hope every homeowner takes away from this video is understanding the difference between a home that's dated and a home that's neglected. Those are not the same thing at all. A dated home tells buyers they may want to personalize it. A neglected home, on the other hand, makes buyers wonder what else hasn't been maintained. That certainty is expensive. Now, let me give you a real example. I worked with a homeowner who had lived in her house for almost 30 years. She was convinced she needed to completely remodel her kitchen before selling. The cabinets weren't the newest style, the countertops weren't quartz, the appliances were older. She'd already started getting estimates. So instead of asking, what should we replace, I asked her a different question. What problem are we actually trying to solve? Because that's not always the same question. When we step back and look through the home through a buyer's eyes instead of an owner's eyes, something became obvious. The cabinets were in excellent condition. Everything worked. The kitchen was spotless. The layout was functional. The problem wasn't the kitchen. The presentation simply wasn't telling the home story very well. Instead of a major remodel, we focused on fresh paint, better lighting, decluttering, professional photography. Small changes that dramatically improved how buyers experienced the home without creating a massive renovation project. She saved tens of thousands of dollars simply because we slowed down long enough to ask the right questions first. And that's something I've seen over and over again. Good decisions usually start with better questions, not fast answers. Now, this leads directly into another area where homeowners often get stuck: pricing. Most people think pricing is simply about determining what a house is worth. It isn't, at least not entirely. Pricing is really about buyer perception. Your home may absolutely be worth what you're asking. The challenge is whether buyers believe it's worth that amount while they're comparing it to every other home they've seen online. And if you've lived in your home for 20, 30, or even 40 years, this becomes especially difficult because your relationship with the house is completely different from theirs. To you, it's where birthdays were celebrated, where your children grew up, where holidays were spent, where memories were made. To the buyer, it's one of several homes they're considering this weekend. They're not buying your memories, they're buying their future. That's not meant to diminish what your home means to you. Those memories are priceless, but understanding how buyers think allows you to make better decisions as a seller. And that's really what this entire video is about. Not convincing you to sell one way or another, helping you understand how today's market actually works so you can make decisions with confidence instead of emotion. If you're finding this helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe. Every week I make videos like this to help homeowners understand their options, avoid expensive mistakes, and make better real estate decisions. Because whether you eventually work with hero home buyers, list with a real estate agent, or decide not to sell at all, my goal is exactly the same. I want you to make the best decision for you and your family. Now, everything we've talked about so far has really been leading to one bigger question. And in my experience, this is the question that determines whether selling your home becomes a smooth transaction or an incredibly stressful one. Because most homeowners think the biggest decision they'll make is how much to list their house for. I don't think that's the biggest decision at all. I think the biggest decision comes way before that. And once you answer it, almost every other decision becomes much easier. We'll talk about that next. So what's the biggest decision I think homeowners need to make before they ever list their house? It's this. What matters most to you? Not what matters most to your neighbor, not what matters most to your children, not even what matters most to your real estate agent. What matters most to you? Because after nearly 20 years in real estate, I've learned that most homeowners aren't actually selling a house. They're solving a problem. And until you identify the problem you're trying to solve, it's very difficult to know what the right solution looks like. For one homeowner, success means getting every last dollar possible. For another, success means avoiding months of uncertainty. For someone else, it might mean closing quickly so they can relocate to be closer to family. For another, it means staying in the home for another 60 days after closing while they figure out what's next. Those are all completely reasonable goals. but they don't all point to the same solution. One of the biggest mistakes I see is homeowners trying to maximize everything at the same price. Maximum price, maximum convenience, maximum speed, maximum certainty, maximum flexibility. Sometimes that's possible, but more often than not, there are trade-offs. And understanding those trade-offs is one of the most valuable things you can do before making any decisions. If your highest priority is getting the absolute highest price possible, listing your home may very well be the best choice, especially if the home is in great condition, you're not in a hurry, and you're comfortable with preparing the home, showings, negotiations, inspections, and waiting for the right buyer. On the other hand, if certainty matters more than squeezing every last dollar out of the property, your options may look very different. Neither approach is right, neither is wrong. The right answer depends entirely on your priorities, and that's why I always encourage homeowners to define success before choosing a strategy. Because the strategy should support the goal, not the other way around. Now let me tell you about something I don't think gets discussed nearly enough. What happens after the sale? I've had conversations with homeowners who are completely ready to sell their house, but had no idea what they wanted to do next. Should they downsize, rent for a while, move closer to family, buy another home, move into a retirement community, stay in the same city, move across the country? Those questions can feel overwhelming. And because they feel overwhelming, many people delay making any decisions at all. But here's something I've learned. Planning isn't committing. Planning simply creates your options. You don't have to decide today that you're moving 6 months from now. You don't have to sign anything. You don't have to list your house. You don't even have to be certain you're going to sell. There's nothing wrong with simply gathering information, looking at the neighborhoods, talking to family, understanding your options. In fact, the homeowners who experience the least amount of stress are usually the ones who start planning long before they actually move. Because options reduce uncertainty, and uncertainty is often what creates the most stress. Now, let's talk about another challenge that catches many homeowners off guard: family. Sometimes everyone agrees, and that's wonderful, but sometimes they don't. One child thinks you should sell immediately. Another thinks you should keep the home as a rental. Someone else thinks you should remodel it first. Before you know it, a real estate decision has become a family discussion or a family debate, sometimes even a family disagreement. Now, don't misunderstand me. Family options matter. Sometimes they offer perspectives you haven't considered. But here's something I always remind homeowners. The people giving advice usually aren't the ones who have to live with a decision. You are. So listen carefully. Ask questions. Consider everyone's input. Then make the best decision that's best for your goals, your finances, your health, and overall your future. Because no one else can define success for you. Now, let's talk about inspections. This is another place where emotions can get involved very quickly. You may believe your home has been well maintained, and you may absolutely be right. But here's the reality. The inspector is still going to find something. That's literally their job. Maybe it's a loose electrical outlet, an aging water heater, a windowsill, a plumbing issue, a roof observation, minor things, major things, something. And when buyers ask for repairs or credits, many sellers feel like they're being criticized. I understand that feeling. After all, it's your home. You've lived there. You've cared for it. You've invested in it. But here's the question I encourage homeowners to ask themselves. Is this issue worth losing the deal? Sometimes the answer is yes. Most of the time, it isn't. I've seen homeowners lose excellent buyers because they became focused on winning an argument instead of accomplishing their goal. Sometimes spending a little money protects a much bigger opportunity. Now, let's bring this all together. There are more ways to sell a home today than ever before. Listing with an agent, selling as is, selling directly to an investor, creative financing in some situations. Every option exists because different homeowners have different priorities. And I think that's important to remember. Because you'll hear people say things like, you should always list, you should never sell to an investor. I don't believe either statement is true. The best solution depends on the homeowner, not the opinion. If your house is in great condition and you're not in a hurry and your goal is maximizing price, listing may absolutely be your best option. If you're facing a situation where convenience, certainty, flexibility, or timing matter more, another solution might make more sense. That's why I don't believe in one-size-fits-all advice. Real life is more complicated than that. I leave you with one final story. I met with a homeowner who had lived in her house for decades. Her husband's health had declined and he had always handled the major financial decisions. She wasn't ready to sell that day. She simply wanted to understand her options. She thought she needed a complete renovation before she could ever consider selling. She didn't. What she really needed was clarity. We talked through what actually needed attention and what didn't, what her priorities were, what her timeline looked like, what her different selling options were. By the end of the conversation, the house hadn't changed. Her situation hadn't changed, but something much more important had: her confidence. Because uncertainty had been replaced with understanding. And that's really the lesson I hope you take away from this video. Most people think the value of their home is measured in dollars. And financially, that's true. But your decisions also have an emotional cost. Preparing the house, repairs, showings, negotiations, inspections, waiting, uncertainty. For some homeowners, going through all of that is absolutely worth it. For others, it isn't. Neither answer is wrong. The important thing is knowing your answer before the process begins. Because if you don't decide what matters most before you start, the process ends up making that decision for you. And that's when expensive mistakes happen. So if you're over 60 and thinking about selling your home, remember this: the rules have changed. Today's buyers think differently. Not every repair is worth making. Pricing is about perception as much as value. Inspections are part of the process, not a personal attack. The best selling strategy depends on your priorities. And selling your home isn't just about where you've been. It's about where you're going next. Whether you decide to sell this month, next year, or 5 years from now, I hope you'll start planning sooner rather than later. Not because planning commits you to anything, but because planning creates options, and options create confidence. And if you have questions about your own situation, I'd be happy to help you think through them. No pressure, no obligation. Whether you ever work with hero home buyers or not, I simply want you to make the best decision for you and your family. And I'd love to hear from you. If you were thinking about selling your home today, what would matter most? Getting the highest price, reducing stress, or having complete control over your own timeline? Let me know down in the comments. And if you are considering selling soon, I made another video where I break down the biggest financial money pits when preparing to sell your home and what not to fix. If that's been on your mind lately, maybe go watch that one next. I'm Fred Pascal with Hero Home Buyers. Thank you for watching. Good day and God bless.